My husband said our 4-year-old was faking food poisoning for attention, even while she was vomiting with a fever. When he got food poisoning, I told him he was clearly faking it, and now he's turned our home into a military wellness camp, where our daughter has to do 5 a.m. exercises and can't have sugar. My husband has never been the sharpest tool in the shed. I know that sounds bad to say about your own husband, but he's done stuff like claim depression and anxiety don't exist, believes that allergies are fake, and the main thing he struggles to understand is the concept of people not feeling well. According to him, when he was a child, nobody ever got sick, and catching a cold is propaganda. To be clear, it's not that he doesn't believe in the flu or colds being real. He believes that when you do catch a cold, you're supposed to go about life like you don't have it instead of resting in bed or drinking tea. I remember the first time I told him my sister was sick. This was when the virus was around and she had a really serious case of it. His genuine advice was for her to go outside and get some fresh air, then go to the gym and exercise to sweat the disease out. And if that doesn't work, convince yourself you don't have it. I laughed because I thought he was joking, but it turns out he was completely serious. A few weeks later, when he found out my sister didn't follow his advice, he became very angry and told me I'm only feeding the narrative that humans aren't resilient beings and are instead delicate daisies who need their hot tea and blankets when sick. He and I had our daughter 4 years ago, and I genuinely believed he would understand that babies do indeed need all the care in the world, but this was not the case. I remember he would let her cry for hours or not feed her sometimes when I was at work to get her acclimated to not eating. His reasoning was that it builds up her tolerance to surviving without food and therefore makes her body stronger in the long run. We had huge arguments about this, and things only got better when I threatened to leave and even press charges for neglectful parenting. He became a bit better at understanding that our child does indeed need food and warm clothes and started providing for her, but one thing he's still never been able to grasp is our daughter getting sick. We had to have a huge fight about her vaccines back in the day. Nowadays, our daughter is a little more grown and can eat more adult foods as time goes on. Well, about a week ago, my daughter had McDonald's for the first time. She had some chicken nuggets and really enjoyed them. The next day, however, she started feeling really ill and came to us in the middle of the night saying she was throwing up. Both my husband and I woke up, and he told me to go help her. I did and stayed with her until she fell back asleep. I came back to bed and woke my husband to talk about it, and his response baffled me. He asked if I was seriously falling for her manipulation. I asked what he meant, and he said, "It's obvious. Our daughter wants attention and wants to skip school. She's learned that by being sick, she'll get attention, and she's now old enough to use things like that to her advantage. She isn't sick, and her doing things like this is your fault." I remember being in utter disbelief and going to bed. The next day, my daughter was still throwing up, so I called in sick to work to care for her, while my husband complained all morning about how she was clearly faking. Even after I literally showed him her vomiting and the fact she had a fever, he still didn't believe me. My daughter thankfully got better after 2 days of this. My husband complained about it the whole time. Thing is, about 3 weeks later, something I never foresaw happened. My husband came down with food poisoning. He was bedridden and throwing up over and over. I remember he asked me to get him some water, and this was where I had my sweet revenge. I told him he was clearly faking it for attention, probably too lazy to go to work and wanted to lay in bed all day and wasn't actually sick. I then told him to get his own water. The look on my husband's face was priceless. That was yesterday, and he's still sick today. I came in this morning to ask if he's done faking, and he did not look happy in the slightest. But here's the thing. His reaction to my revenge was just the beginning of what would become the most eye-opening week of our marriage. Full story on channel, link below. I watched him struggle to sit up in bed, his face pale and clammy. He reached for the water glass on the nightstand, but his hand trembled too much. Part of me felt guilty watching him suffer, but then I remembered all the times our daughter had been genuinely ill, and he'd dismissed her pain. I left the bedroom and went to check on our daughter. She was playing quietly with her dolls in the living room, completely recovered from her food poisoning episode. She looked up at me with those big brown eyes and asked if Daddy was feeling better. I smoothed her hair and told her he just needed some rest. The morning routine continued as normal. I made breakfast for our daughter and myself while my husband remained in bed. Every so often, I'd hear him rushing to the bathroom, followed by the unmistakable sounds of someone being violently ill. Each time, I'd pause what I was doing and wait for him to call out for help. He never did. By noon, he finally emerged from the bedroom, looking absolutely terrible. His usually neat hair stuck up at odd angles and his complexion had taken on a grayish tint. He shuffled into the kitchen where I was making lunch for our daughter. I glanced at him briefly before returning to the sandwich I was preparing. He stood there for a moment, clearly expecting me to ask how he was feeling or offer to make him something. Instead, I hummed quietly while spreading peanut butter on bread. He cleared his throat, then again, louder. I continued ignoring him. Finally, he moved to the cabinet and tried to reach for a glass. His hand shook so badly that he nearly dropped it. I watched from the corner of my eye as he struggled to turn on the faucet and fill the glass with water. Some of it spilled on the counter, but I didn't move to help or clean it up. Our daughter came into the kitchen then, carrying her favorite stuffed elephant. She took one look at her father and her face scrunched up with concern. Before she could say anything, I quickly suggested she go wash her hands for lunch. She scampered off to the bathroom. My husband leaned heavily against the counter, sipping his water in small, careful sips. His jaw was clenched tight, and I could see the muscle twitching. He was angry but too sick to do much about it. I finished making our daughter's lunch and called her to the table. As she ate, chattering about her dolls and asking if we could go to the park later, my husband stood there watching us. The silence from him was deafening. After lunch, I took our daughter to the living room to play while my husband retreated back to the bedroom. I could hear him on the phone, his voice weak but insistent. He was calling his workplace, and I heard him explain that he had food poisoning and wouldn't be able to come in. The irony wasn't lost on me. The afternoon passed slowly. I played with our daughter daughter, helped her with a puzzle, and read her favorite book twice. Every hour or so, my husband would emerge from the bedroom, looking progressively worse. He'd get water or crackers from the kitchen, moving slowly and carefully. Each time he passed through, he'd look at me with this expression that was part anger, part disbelief, and part something else I couldn't quite identify. By evening, he seemed to have turned a corner. The trips to the bathroom became less frequent, and some color returned to his face. He managed to keep down some plain toast and ginger ale. Our daughter was happy to see him improving and tried to show him the picture she'd colored that afternoon. He barely glanced at it, his attention focused entirely on me. After I put our daughter to bed, reading her an extra story because she asked so sweetly, I found my husband sitting in the living room. He was on the couch, wrapped in a blanket despite the warm evening. The TV was off, and he was just sitting there in the semi-darkness. I went about my evening routine, tidying up toys, washing dishes, preparing our daughter's backpack for school the next day. I could feel his eyes following my every movement. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. As I wiped down the kitchen counters, I heard him shift on the couch. The blanket rustled as he adjusted his position. Still, he said nothing. I finished in the kitchen and moved to the living room, picking up the last few toys our daughter had left scattered on the floor. When I straightened up, toy basket in hand, our eyes met. His expression was cold, calculating. It was a look I'd never seen from him before, and something about it made my skin prickle with unease. But I kept my face neutral, even managing a small smile before heading down the hallway to put the toys away. That night, he slept on the couch. I heard him get up several times, probably still dealing with the lingering effects of the food poisoning. Each time, I lay in bed listening to his footsteps, the running water in the bathroom, the quiet groans of discomfort. Part of me wanted to get up and help him, to be the supportive wife I'd always been, but then I remembered his words about our daughter faking her illness, and I pulled the covers up higher and closed my eyes. The next morning arrived with our daughter bouncing into my bedroom, ready for another day. My husband was already up, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of what looked like weak tea. He appeared better, though still pale and drawn. Our daughter ran to him, asking if he felt better, and he managed a tight smile for her. I busied myself with the morning routine, getting our daughter dressed and ready for school. My husband watched our interactions closely, his eyes narrowing whenever our daughter laughed at something I said or gave me a hug. It was subtle, but I noticed. I dropped our daughter off at school and returned home to find my husband still sitting at the kitchen table. The weak tea had gone cold in front of him. He watched me enter with an intensity that made me pause at the doorway. I moved past him to start cleaning up the breakfast dishes, but I could feel his stare boring into my back. The silence stretched between us as I loaded the dishwasher. When I turned around, he was standing directly behind me. I startled, nearly dropping the plate in my hand. He stepped closer, backing me against the counter. His breath smelled sour from being sick, and his eyes had a strange glint I'd never seen before. He reached past me to set his mug in the sink, his arm brushing against mine. The contact felt deliberate, calculated. He lingered there for a moment before stepping back. I quickly moved away, my heart racing for reasons I couldn't quite explain. Throughout the morning, he shadowed my movements around the house. When I went to do laundry, he appeared in the doorway of the laundry room. When I tried to work on my laptop in the living room, he sat in the chair directly across from me, just watching. No book, no phone, no TV, just watching. I tried to focus on my work emails, but concentration was impossible. Every time I glanced up, his eyes were on me. The familiar comfort of our home suddenly felt oppressive. I closed my laptop and stood to leave the room. He stood too, following me into the kitchen. I opened the refrigerator to get some water, and he positioned himself between me and the doorway. My hands trembled slightly as I poured the water. Something had shifted in him, something fundamental. The man who had always dismissed illness as weakness now seemed to understand power in a different way. The phone rang, breaking the tension. It was the school nurse. Our daughter had thrown up during art class and needed to be picked up. I grabbed my keys, but my husband's hand shot out and took them from me. He shook his head slowly, a small smile playing at his lips. Oh my goodness, this is getting so intense. The way the husband is just silently watching her every move is giving me chills. He's like a completely different person now. And that moment when he backed her against the counter and got so close, I was holding my breath. The scariest part is how he's not saying anything at all, just following her from room to room like a shadow. Then when the school called about their daughter being sick and he grabbed those keys from her, no way! He pocketed the keys and walked toward the door. I followed, explaining that I always picked her up when she was sick, that she would want me. He turned at the door, that strange smile still on his face, and left without a word. I stood there, stunned. In 4 years, he had never once picked up our daughter from school when she was ill. He'd always claimed it would only encourage her weakness. My phone buzzed with a text from him, a photo of our daughter in the car, looking miserable and confused. 20 minutes later, they returned. Our daughter reached for me immediately, but my husband intercepted, scooping her up himself. He carried her to her room, something he'd never done when she was sick. I followed, watching as he tucked her in with exaggerated care, smoothing her blankets, adjusting her pillows. Our daughter kept looking at me with confused eyes, clearly wanting her usual comfort routine, but every time I stepped forward, my husband would shift his position, blocking me. He brought her water, crackers, even her favorite stuffed animals, all while maintaining his position between us. I retreated to the doorway, watching this bizarre performance. He was doing everything right, all the things he'd refused to do before, but there was something mechanical about it, something false. Our daughter sensed it too, her little face crumpling as she asked for mommy. He turned to me then, that calculated look back in his eyes. He suggested I should go rest, that I looked tired from taking care of him yesterday. His tone was solicitous, caring even, but underneath was something else, a warning. I stayed in the doorway. Our daughter's whimpers grew louder. Finally, she began crying in earnest, reaching past him toward me. The sound of her distress overrode everything else. I pushed past him and gathered her into my arms. She buried her face in my shoulder, her little body shaking breaking with sobs. My husband stood there watching us, his jaw working. Then he left the room. I heard his footsteps heading to our bedroom, drawers opening and closing. When I finally got our daughter settled and sleeping, I found him in our room, going through my things. My laptop was open on the bed. My phone, which I'd left charging, was in his hand. He looked up when I entered, no shame or embarrassment on his face, just that same calculating expression. He set my phone down carefully and closed the laptop. I asked what he was doing. He tilted his head, studying me like I was a specimen under a microscope. Then he spoke about trust, about how marriages need transparency, about how keeping secrets was a form of illness, a weakness that infected relationships. His words were measured, careful, nothing like his usual blunt declarations. I reached for my phone, but he was faster, sliding it into his pocket. He suggested we should share passwords, have access to each other's devices. For trust, he said. For health. The way he said health made my skin crawl. The rest of the afternoon passed in a strange dance. He stayed home from work, claiming he was still recovering, but he seemed to have plenty of energy to monitor my every move. When I tried to check on our daughter, he was there. When I attempted to make lunch, he insisted on helping, standing too close, reaching around me unnecessarily. Our daughter woke up feeling better, the stomach bug passing quickly as they often do with children. She wanted to color at the kitchen table, and I set her up with her crayons and coloring books. My husband sat down next to her, praising her artwork with an enthusiasm he'd never shown before. But there was something performative about it. He kept glancing at me, gauging my reaction. When our daughter showed him her drawing of our family, he made a big show of pointing out how she'd drawn mommy and daddy the same size, equally important. The emphasis felt pointed, deliberate. As evening approached, I started preparing dinner. My husband stationed himself at the kitchen island, ostensibly to keep our daughter company, but really to watch me. He commented on everything I did, from how I chopped vegetables to which spices I used. Constructive criticism, he called it, for health. Our daughter picked up on the tension, becoming clingy and whiny. She wrapped her arms around my leg while I cooked, something she hadn't done in over a year. My husband's eyes narrowed at this display of attachment. He called her over to look at something on his phone, but she wouldn't let go of me. His face darkened. He stood and walked over, gently but firmly detaching her from my leg. He carried her to the living room, speaking in low, serious tones. I couldn't hear the words, but I could see our daughter's face growing troubled. When they returned, she wouldn't meet my eyes. Dinner was a silent affair. Our daughter pushed her food around her plate, occasionally stealing glances at me before quickly looking away. My husband ate with deliberate slowness, chewing each bite thoroughly. The sound seemed amplified in the quiet kitchen. After dinner, I started to clear the table, but my husband insisted I sit while he cleaned up. Another first. He made a production of washing each dish, organizing the leftover food, wiping down every surface. Our daughter sat with me, but she seemed afraid to show affection, her little body tense beside mine. Bath time arrived, and my husband announced he would handle it. Our daughter's face fell. Bath time had always been our special time, full of bubbles and silly songs. But when she started to protest, my husband knelt down and whispered something in her ear. She went quiet, nodding solemnly. I listened to them in the bathroom, the absence of giggles and splashing heartbreaking. When they emerged, our daughter was in her pajamas, hair neatly combed. She looked like a different child, subdued and careful. My husband guided her to bed, and I followed. He read her a story, choosing one about listening to parents and being good. His voice was measured, pausing at certain parts for emphasis. Our daughter lay still, her usual bedtime wiggling absent. When he finished, he kissed her forehead and stood expectantly by the door. I moved to give her our usual goodnight ritual, but she turned away, mumbling that she was tired. My husband's hand found my elbow, guiding me from the room. The door clicked shut on our daughter's quiet sniffles. In the hallway, he maintained his grip on my elbow. His fingers weren't tight enough to hurt, but the message was clear. He steered me to the living room, gesturing for me to sit. Then he began to speak about family dynamics, about how children could be influenced by negativity, how important it was to present a united front. The words were reasonable on the surface, the kind of thing any parenting book might say. But the context, the delivery, the timing, it all felt wrong. He spoke about how our daughter had been too attached to me, how unhealthy that was, how she needed to learn independence, strength. I found myself nodding, not from agreement, but from a growing sense of unease. This calculated version of my husband was far more unsettling than his usual bluntness. At least before, I knew where I stood. Now, I felt like I was navigating a minefield. He moved to sit beside me on the couch, closer than necessary. His arm went around my shoulders, a gesture that should have been comforting but felt like a trap. He continued talking about health, strength, resilience, about how he'd learned something from being sick, about power and weakness. My phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, glancing at the screen. It was my sister texting to check in. He showed me the message but didn't hand me the phone. Instead, he typed a response himself, something brief and dismissive. Then he deleted the conversation. I stiffened, but his arm tightened around me. He explained that my sister's negativity about illness had infected our household, that her weakness had spread to me and from me to our daughter, that we needed to quarantine ourselves from such influences. The medical terminology felt like mockery. The evening stretched on. He kept me beside him on the couch, his arm a constant weight. He turned on the TV, choosing a documentary about survival and human endurance. He provided running commentary, pointing out how the human body could overcome anything with the right mindset. When I tried to excuse myself to use the bathroom, he followed me down the hallway, waiting outside the door. When I emerged, he was examining the family photos on the wall. He commented on how happy we looked in our wedding photo, how strong and healthy. Before the infection of weakness, he said. Back in the living room, he pulled out my laptop. He knew my password, had known it for years, but the way he entered it felt different now, deliberate. He scrolled through my browser history, my emails, my social media, looking for symptoms, he said, signs of infection. He found the emails I'd exchanged with my sister about our daughter's illness. His face darkened as he read my complaints about his dismissiveness. He found the text thread with my friend, where I'd vented about his reaction to our daughter's sickness. Each discovery seemed to confirm something for him. When he finally closed the laptop, his expression was serene, resolved. He turned to me with that strange smile and said we would start fresh tomorrow. A new health regimen for the whole family. No more weakness, no more coddling, no more infection. His hand found mine, squeezing just a bit too hard. The bedroom that night felt like a cell. He insisted on keeping both our phones on his nightstand. For our health, he said, to avoid the temptation of negative influences during the night. He fell asleep quickly, but I lay awake, his arm heavy across my waist, pinning me in place. Morning came too soon. He was already awake when I opened my eyes, propped on one elbow, watching me. He announced that he'd called in sick to work again, to help implement our new family health plan. The word health was beginning to sound like a threat. Our daughter was subdued at breakfast. When she asked for her usual cereal, my husband explained that we were eating differently now. Stronger foods for stronger bodies. He prepared plain oatmeal with no sugar, setting the bowl in front of her with ceremonial gravity. She looked at me pleadingly, but I was trapped by his watchful gaze. I ate my own plain oatmeal in silence, the texture like paste in my mouth. Our daughter managed a few bites before pushing the bowl away. My husband's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Yet, after breakfast, he announced we would all go for a walk. Fresh air and exercise, essential for health. Our daughter, still feeling weak from yesterday's stomach bug, protested that her tummy hurt. His face went cold. He knelt beside her chair and spoke in low, measured tones about lying and manipulation. I intervened, suggesting she might really still feel unwell. His head swiveled toward me, that calculating look back in full force. He stood slowly, never breaking eye contact. Then he smiled and agreed that perhaps she needed more rest, but his tone suggested this was a test, and I had failed. He carried our daughter back to her room, despite her wiggling to get down. I followed, watching as he tucked her in with the same mechanical precision as yesterday. This time, when she reached for me, he caught her hands and placed them back under the blanket. Germs, he explained. We didn't want mommy getting sick. The morning passed in tense surveillance. He shadowed me from room to room, commenting on everything from how I folded laundry to how often I checked on our daughter. Each observation was couched in terms of health and efficiency, but the real message was clear. He was in control now. My phone rang from his pocket, my work calling. The part where he follows her to the bathroom and then goes through all her private messages is kind of crazy, is it not? And now her work is calling, but the phone is in his pocket? He answered it himself, explaining that I was taking a personal day to focus on family health. The presumption of it, the casual takeover of my life, sent chills down my spine. But when I reached for the phone, he stepped back, still talking to my confused colleague. After he hung up, he handed me the phone with a magnanimous gesture, but I noticed he'd changed the settings. Location tracking was on. New apps had been installed, ones that monitored screen time and app usage. For our health, he explained, to reduce negative digital influences. Our daughter emerged from her room around noon, looking pale but determined to be up. She came to me for a hug, but my husband intercepted again. He checked her forehead with exaggerated concern, declared her fever-free, and announced she was well enough for strengthening exercises. What followed was a bizarre hour of him trying to engage her in calisthenics and breathing exercises. Our 4-year-old looked bewildered as he demonstrated proper push-up form and explained the importance of building core strength. She kept looking at me, confusion and distress clear on her little face. When she finally broke down crying, saying her tummy still hurt and she wanted to rest, his face went through a series of expressions: anger, disappointment, calculation, then suddenly, sympathy. He scooped her up, all concerned now, and carried her to the couch. But the damage was done. She cried harder, reaching for me. This time I didn't let him stop me. I took her from his arms, feeling her little body relax against mine. He stood there watching us, his jaw working. Then he turned and walked to the kitchen. I heard him on the phone, his voice too low to make out words. He returned with a thermometer and medicine, playing the concerned father now. But when he approached with the medicine cup, our daughter turned her face away. She whispered that she didn't want daddy's medicine. The words hung in the air between us, heavy with implication. His face went very still. He set the medicine down carefully, precisely. Then he suggested that perhaps mommy was projecting her own fears onto our daughter, creating psychosomatic symptoms through negative suggestion. The medical terminology rolled off his tongue like he'd been practicing. I gave our daughter the medicine myself while he watched. She took it reluctantly, her eyes never leaving his face. When she finished, she burrowed deeper into my arms. He observed this for a moment, then announced he needed to run some errands. For our health plan, he said. He left with both sets of car keys, effectively stranding us. The moment the door closed, our daughter's whole body relaxed. She looked up at me with those big brown eyes and whispered, asking why daddy was being so strange. I didn't have a good answer. We spent the afternoon quietly. I let her watch her favorite movie, gave her the crackers she wanted, held her when she dozed off. Normal mother-daughter things that now felt like acts of rebellion. I found myself checking the windows, watching for his car. He returned as the sun was setting, carrying multiple shopping bags, health food stores, vitamin shops, even what looked like medical supplies. He unpacked everything with ritualistic care, explaining each item's purpose in our new family wellness protocol. Dinner preparation became another performance. He insisted on helping, on teaching me the proper way to prepare nutritious meals. His hands covered mine as I chopped vegetables, guiding my movements. Standing behind me, his breath on my neck, corrections whispered in my ear. Our daughter watched from her booster seat, unnaturally quiet. When he plated the food, arranging it with scientific precision, she didn't even ask what it was. She just picked up her fork and began eating mechanically, her eyes downcast. The meal itself was flavorless but nutritionally optimized, he explained. Each bite calculated for maximum health benefit. He watched us eat with satisfaction, noting who finished what, who chewed properly, properly, who drank enough water, data points in his new system. After dinner, he announced early bedtime for everyone. Rest was crucial for health. Our daughter didn't protest, seemingly eager to escape to her room. But when I moved to take her, he blocked my path. He would handle bedtime tonight to give me a break for my health. I watched them go, my daughter's small hand swallowed in his. Through her doorway, I could see him sitting on her bed, talking earnestly. Her responses were monosyllabic, her body language closed. When he finally emerged, he closed her door firmly behind him. In our bedroom, he laid out my pajamas, the ones he thought were most appropriate for health. Cotton, breathable, modest. He watched me change with clinical interest, commenting on my posture, my muscle tone, areas that needed work. His gaze felt like an examination. He'd rearranged our bedroom while out, a humidifier in the corner for optimal air moisture, blackout curtains for better sleep quality, a white noise machine for proper rest, even new pillows, orthopedically designed. Our sanctuary transformed into a sterile wellness center. As we lay in the dark, he outlined tomorrow's plans. Morning exercise for the whole family, nutritionally optimized meals, educational activities focused on health and strength, no screen time, no outside influences, no weakness. His hand found mine under the covers, fingers interlacing like shackles. Sleep wouldn't come. His breathing was deep and even beside me, but I could feel the tension in his body, the coiled readiness. Several times I thought about getting up, checking on our daughter, but his arm would tighten around me as if sensing my intention. The next morning began before dawn. He woke me with gentle shaking, already dressed in exercise clothes. Time for our new routine, he announced. I protested that our daughter needed sleep, but he was already heading to her room. I scrambled after him. She was confused and groggy as he dressed her in the new athletic wear he'd bought. Her protests were met with calm explanations about discipline and health. When she said her tummy hurt again, his eye twitched, but he maintained his patient demeanor. Growing pains, he diagnosed. The morning exercise was a disaster. Our daughter could barely keep her eyes open, stumbling through jumping jacks and stretches. When she started crying, he knelt beside her and spoke about mental strength overcoming physical weakness. His words were gentle, but his grip on her shoulders was firm. I intervened, declaring she was too young for this regimen. His head turned toward me slowly, that calculating look returning. He released our daughter and stood, moving into my space. His voice was soft as he explained how undermining parental authority created confusion and weakness in children. Our daughter watched this interaction with wide eyes. When he turned back to her, she immediately attempted another jumping jack, her little face determined not to cause more conflict. The sight of her trying so hard to please him, to avoid whatever tension she sensed, made my chest tight. Breakfast was another carefully orchestrated meal. He'd prepared everything while we exercised, measuring portions, calculating nutrients. Our daughter stared at the green smoothie he placed before her with poorly concealed dismay. When she gagged on the first sip, his jaw clenched. I quickly suggested adding some honey for taste. The look he gave me could have frozen water. He explained with exaggerated patience how sugar was poison, how it created weakness and dependency, how real strength came from accepting discomfort. Our daughter took another sip, tears streaming down her face. The morning continued in this vein. Every normal childhood want or need was met with lectures about strength and health. When she asked to play with her dolls, he redirected her to educational workbooks. When she complained of being tired, he prescribed fresh air and movement. By lunch, she was exhausted and cranky. The carefully prepared meal of steamed vegetables and plain chicken was met with outright refusal. She pushed the plate away and asked for peanut butter and jelly. The simple request hung in the air like a challenge. His response was measured. He removed her plate and explained that hunger was the body's way of building appreciation for proper nutrition. She could eat what was provided or wait until dinner. Our daughter looked at me in shock, waiting for me to intervene. I started to speak, but he cut me off with a raised hand. Not harsh, just authoritative. He suggested I was too emotionally involved to make rational decisions about our daughter's health, that my weakness was infecting her. The word infection again, always returning to his twisted medical metaphors. Our daughter began to cry in earnest, not the manipulative tears he always accused her of, but genuine distress. He observed this with scientific detachment, timing the duration, noting the intensity. When she reached for me, he stepped between us. The afternoon stretched endlessly. He kept our daughter busy with his approved activities while maintaining his position between us. When she complained of hunger, he offered water. When she said she was tired, he prescribed light calisthenics. Each interaction was a small battle of wills. By evening, the house felt like a pressure cooker. Our daughter had gone quiet, that awful stillness of a child who's learned that resistance brings consequences. She ate her dinner without complaint, did her evening exercises without protest, prepared for bed without asking for stories or songs. When he tucked her in, she lay rigid under the covers. He praised her improvement, her growing strength, said he was proud of her progress. The words should have been encouraging, but they sounded like threats. She nodded solemnly, her eyes finding mine over his shoulder. That night, as we prepared for bed, he was almost jovial. The plan was working, he said. Our daughter was adapting, getting stronger. Soon, I would see the benefits too. We would be the healthiest, strongest family. No more weakness, no more coddling, no more infection. He fell asleep with a satisfied smile. I lay awake again, his arm across me like a bar, listening to the house settle. Somewhere in the darkness, I thought I heard our daughter crying softly, but when I strained to listen, there was only silence. The pattern continued for days. Wake before dawn, exercise, nutritionally optimized meals, educational activities, early bedtime, no deviation, no weakness, no mercy. Our daughter grew quieter each day, her natural exuberance dimming like a flame deprived of oxygen. I tried small rebellions, sneaking her a cookie when he was in the bathroom, adding a bit of jam to her toast while his back was turned. Each time he seemed to know, not accusatory, just disappointed. These setbacks were my fault, he explained. My weakness undermined undermining her progress. The isolation was complete. No playdates. They might expose her to weak children. No calls to my sister. Her negative influence wasn't welcome. Even trips to the park were structured exercises in strength building. Our world had shrunk to the confines of his control. Our daughter stopped asking for things, stopped complaining when she felt sick, stopped reaching for me when she was hurt. She'd learned that showing weakness brought lectures and consequences. Better to endure in silence. The transformation was heartbreaking. One morning, she woke with a genuine fever. Her forehead was burning, her cheeks flushed. When I told him, he felt her head and declared it psychosomatic. Mind over matter. She needed to push through, build immunity. I watched her struggle through morning exercises, swaying on her feet. When she vomited during breakfast, he cleaned it up with grim efficiency. Her body was purging weakness, he explained. This was progress. What strikes me most is how quickly the little girl learns to stop showing any needs or wants. That kind of emotional shutdown in a child happens faster than most people realize. The mother's small acts of rebellion with cookies and jam feel both brave and heartbreaking because they're so tiny compared to what's needed. He prepared another smoothie, insisting she drink it all. She managed 3 sips before running to the bathroom again. This was too much. I gathered her in my arms, feeling how her little body shook. I announced I was taking her to the doctor. He stepped in front of the door, not threatening, just immovable. Doctors perpetuated weakness, he explained. They profited from keeping people sick. The standoff stretched between us. Our daughter whimpered in my arms, clearly miserable. Finally, he stepped aside, but he kept the car keys. If I wanted to indulge her weakness, I could walk. The clinic was 3 miles away. In principle, he said, the walk would be good for her. I bundled her up and started walking. She was too heavy to carry the whole way, but too sick to walk herself. We made it 2 blocks before he pulled up beside us in the car. He'd reconsidered, he said. Family health meant supporting each other, even in weakness. The drive to the clinic was silent except for our daughter's labored breathing. At the reception desk, he spoke for us, explaining his theory about psychosomatic illness. The receptionist looked concerned, glancing between us. I quickly clarified that our daughter had a fever and had been vomiting. In the examination room, he dominated the conversation with the doctor, questioning every diagnosis, every recommendation. When the doctor prescribed antibiotics for strep throat, he launched into a lecture about antibiotic resistance and natural immunity. The doctor looked at me with raised eyebrows. I took the prescription. He watched me with that calculating look. On the drive home, he explained how I just set our daughter's progress back months, how antibiotics would weaken her system, create dependency, but he would allow it this once, to prove his point when she didn't really improve. At home, I gave her the medicine despite his disapproving presence. She took it gratefully, then curled up on the couch. He sat across from us, timing how long she rested, making notes in a notebook he'd started carrying, data for his wellness experiment. By evening, the antibiotics were working. Her fever broke, and she managed to keep down some soup. Real soup that I'd made while he was in the bathroom, with noodles and flavor. She ate it like it was ambrosia, her eyes constantly checking to see if he noticed. He did notice. That night, after our daughter was in bed, he showed me his notebook, pages of observations, measurements, theories. Our family was his test case, proving his beliefs about strength and weakness. The clinical detachment in his voice as he explained his findings chilled me. The next morning, our daughter felt better, but was still weak. He declared the antibiotics unnecessary, that she would have recovered through mental strength alone. The illness had been a test, and we had failed, but he was patient. We would have other opportunities to prove our strength. The weekend brought new challenges. He announced we would be camping. Real camping, not the comfortable version we'd done before. This would build character, test our limits. Our daughter's face fell, but she didn't protest. She'd learned that protests brought consequences. He packed minimal supplies, no treats, no comfort items, just basics for survival. When I tried to sneak in our daughter's favorite stuffed animal, he removed it. Emotional crutches prevented growth, he explained. She needed to find strength within herself. The campsite he chose was remote, primitive, no facilities, no other families around. He set up the tent with military precision while lecturing about self-sufficiency. Our daughter sat on a log, looking small and lost without her usual comforts. The first night was miserable. The ground was hard, the sleeping bags thin. Our daughter whimpered quietly, trying not to let him hear. When I reached out to comfort her, his hand caught my wrist. She needed to self-soothe, he whispered. Learn independence. Morning came too early. He roused us for sunrise calisthenics, ignoring our daughter's exhaustion. The breakfast of plain oatmeal cooked over the campfire was met with resignation. She ate mechanically, all joy in the camping experience extinguished by his regime. The day's activities were survival training disguised as family fun, building shelters, finding water, identifying edible plants. Our 4-year-old struggled to keep up, her little hands too small for the tasks he set. When she couldn't tie a proper knot, his disappointment was palpable. By afternoon, she was filthy, exhausted, and defeated. When she stumbled and scraped her knee, she didn't even cry, just looked at the blood with dull acceptance. He praised this as progress. She was learning to overcome pain. I cleaned the wound while he lectured about natural healing. The second night was worse. It rained, and our hastily constructed shelter leaked. Our daughter shivered between us, too cold to sleep. He insisted this was good for her. Adversity built character. The human body could adapt to anything with the right mindset. I pulled her closer, trying to share my warmth. He didn't stop me this time, but I could feel his disapproval in the darkness. Another failure on my part. Another setback in his grand experiment. Our daughter's teeth chattered as she finally fell into exhausted sleep. Morning brought weak sunshine and the end of our ordeal. As we packed up, he declared the trip a success. We had survived, grown stronger. Our daughter nodded mechanically when he asked if she'd had fun. The lie came easily to her now. Another survival skill learned. The drive home was quiet. Our daughter fell asleep immediately, her face pale with exhaustion. In the rearview mirror, I could see the dark circles under her eyes, the way her clothes hung looser on her frame. The strength training was taking its toll. Back home, he unpacked with satisfaction. The camping gear would be regular equipment now, he announced. Monthly trips to build resilience. I watched our daughter's face crumble before she caught herself, smoothing her expression into blank acceptance. That evening, while he showered, I found our daughter in her room. She was sitting on her bed, staring at nothing. When I sat beside her, she didn't move. I asked if she was okay, and she nodded automatically. Then, in the smallest voice, she asked when Daddy would be normal again. I didn't have an answer. The man who emerged from the bathroom bore little resemblance to the husband I'd married. This calculating, controlling version was a stranger wearing familiar skin, and he was reshaping our lives according to his twisted vision of strength. The next week brought new rules. Screen time was eliminated entirely. Books were screened for appropriate content. Anything that promoted weakness removed. Even her drawings were critiqued. Too many smiling faces suggested denial of life's hardships. Dark colors indicated wallowing in negativity. Meals became increasingly austere. Flavor was indulgence. Variety was weakness. The same rotating menu of plain proteins and steamed vegetables. Our daughter ate without complaint now, mechanically fueling her body. The joy of sharing meals as a family had been optimized away. He started timing everything. How long it took her to get dressed, brush her teeth, complete tasks. Everything was data for his experiment. Improvements were expected daily. Setbacks brought disappointed lectures about commitment and effort. I tried to shield her when possible. Extra hugs when he wasn't looking. Whispered reassurances during his bathroom breaks. But he seemed to sense these infractions. His surveillance intensified, his presence constant. Even sleeping became monitored for proper form and duration. Our daughter adapted with heartbreaking efficiency. She woke before her alarm, dressed quickly, ate without complaint, did her exercises, completed her educational tasks, submitted to his wellness checks. A tiny robot programmed for his approval. The breaking point came 3 weeks into his regime. Our daughter woke genuinely ill again, this time with a stomach bug. She'd vomited in her bed but hadn't called out, afraid of showing weakness. I found her trying to clean it up herself, tears streaming down her face. When I told him, he nodded approvingly. She was learning to handle problems independently. This was progress. The fact that she was 4 years old and scared seemed irrelevant to his calculations. He prepared his usual plain breakfast, insisting she try to eat. She managed one bite before running to the bathroom. I followed, holding her hair as she retched. Her little body shook with the effort. When she finished, she apologized for being weak. The words broke something inside me. No child should apologize for being sick. I announced I was keeping her home from school and taking care of her my way. He stood in the doorway, that familiar, calculating look returning. Then he smiled, that cold smile that never reached his eyes. Of course, he said. I should do what I thought best. He had work to attend to anyway. The ease of his capitulation should have warned me, but I was too relieved to question it. I spent the day caring for our daughter normally. Ginger ale for her stomach, crackers when she could manage them, cartoons on TV, her favorite stuffed animals for comfort. She bloomed under the attention, even sick as she was, smiled for the first time in weeks, laughed at a silly cartoon, curled against me without checking if it was allowed. For a few hours, I had my daughter back. He came home early. I heard his car in the driveway and felt our daughter tense beside me. The cartoons were still playing, empty ginger ale cans on the coffee table. Evidence of our weakness-indulging day. She looked at me with panic in her eyes, but he didn't explode, didn't lecture, just observed the scene with that clinical detachment, made notes in his notebook, asked how she was feeling. When she automatically said stronger, he nodded approvingly. The lie pleased him more than truth ever could. That night, after she was asleep, he presented his findings. 3 weeks of data proving his theories. Our daughter was physically stronger, more independent, less prone to emotional outbursts. The illness today was just her body's final purge of weakness. Tomorrow, they would resume the program with renewed intensity. I looked at his charts and graphs, the reduction of our daughter to data points. Her weight loss reframed as appropriate BMI adjustment. Her withdrawal called emotional regulation. Her exhaustion labeled adaptation period. Our child transformed into a successful experiment. He talked about expanding the program, workshops for other parents, a book about raising resilient children, maybe a YouTube channel documenting our journey, our family as proof of concept for his revolution against weakness. The commercial possibilities excited him more than our daughter's well-being ever had. I nodded along, my mind racing. Something had to change. This couldn't continue. Our daughter was disappearing, replaced by a fearful ghost trying to meet impossible standards. The husband I'd married was gone, replaced by this cold experimenter, and I was failing to protect the person who needed me most. That night, I lay awake planning. He slept deeply beside me, satisfied with his progress. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to prove his theories, but tomorrow would also bring my own experiment in resistance. For our daughter's sake, I had to find a way to fight back against his regime of strength. The morning came too soon, as always, but this time, I was ready. I woke before dawn with a plan. My husband still slept beside me, his arm heavy across my waist. I carefully slid out from under it, moving slowly to avoid waking him. Yes, the mom is finally ready to fight back, and I am here for it. That last line about her waking up before dawn with a plan made my heart race with excitement. After watching her daughter apologize for being sick and turn into this scared little robot, seeing the mom say, "Enough is enough," and actually prepare to do something about it is giving me life. In the bathroom, I quietly gathered a few essentials into a small bag I'd hidden behind the towels days earlier. Our daughter's room was my next stop. She was already awake, lying still in bed, waiting for the morning routine to begin. When she saw me enter alone, confusion flickered across her face. I put a finger to my lips and helped her dress in comfortable clothes, not the athletic wear he'd laid out the night before. We moved through the house like ghosts. I grabbed her backpack, stuffing it with snacks, juice boxes, and her favorite stuffed elephant that had had been banished to the top shelf. My purse held our important documents, copies I'd made during his shower times over the past week. The front door seemed impossibly loud as I turned the deadbolt. Our daughter clutched my hand, her small fingers trembling. We stepped outside into the cool morning air. My car sat in the driveway, but the keys were in his pocket, as always. Instead, we walked quickly down the street to where my friend Catherine had parked her car the night before, just as we'd arranged through carefully deleted texts. The car was unlocked, keys under the mat. I buckled our daughter into the backseat and started driving. In the rearview mirror, I watched our house disappear. My phone, left deliberately on the nightstand, would be ringing soon. Let him track that instead of us. Catherine's apartment was across town, a place my husband had never been. She opened the door before we could knock, already dressed and ready. Our daughter ran to her immediately, recognizing safety in her warm smile and open arms. While Catherine settled her on the couch with cartoons and a proper breakfast, I made the calls I'd been planning. The lawyer's office opened at 8. I'd researched carefully, finding one who specialized in cases like mine. The receptionist, hearing the urgency in my voice, squeezed me in for that morning. The women's shelter had a counselor available to meet with us that afternoon. The bank would be my next stop, to open my own account with the money I'd been slowly withdrawing as cash back from grocery purchases. My husband discovered our absence at 6:30, according to Catherine's doorbell camera. He stood on her porch for 20 minutes, alternating between knocking and staring at the camera. His face cycled through expressions I knew well: confusion, calculation, controlled fury. When he finally left, I knew it was only the beginning. The lawyer was a middle-aged woman who listened without judgment as I showed her my documentation, photos of our daughter's weight loss, the notebook I'd found and photographed, full of his experiments, screenshots of texts to my sister about his behavior. She nodded, making notes, building our case. The bank was more complicated. Our joint account required both signatures for large withdrawals, but I could take half of what was there, enough to start. The teller processed my request efficiently, though her eyes showed concern at my shaking hands. I opened my own account, my name only, a small act of independence that felt monumental. Catherine texted updates throughout the morning. Our daughter had eaten 2 bowls of cereal with sugar, played with every toy in the apartment, and fallen asleep on the couch mid-cartoon. Normal 4-year-old things that had become revolutionary acts. My husband had returned twice more, but Catherine didn't answer. The women's shelter counselor was younger than I expected, but radiated competence. She walked me through my options, helped me create a safety plan, gave me resources I didn't know existed. Support groups, temporary housing assistance, legal aid, a whole network of people who understood what we were going through. By afternoon, my husband had escalated his search. He appeared at the grocery store where I often shopped, the park where I took our daughter, even the library we visited for story time, always watching, waiting. Catherine's neighbor reported seeing him parked on their street for an hour before police asked him to move along. The lawyer called with updates. She'd filed the necessary paperwork, started the legal separation process. Emergency custody orders were in motion. The documentation I'd provided was solid, she said. His own notebook would be particularly damaging. Still, she warned, he would fight back. Men like him always did. Our daughter woke from her nap disoriented, but happier than I'd seen her in weeks. Catherine had made her favorite lunch, peanut butter and jelly with the crusts cut off. She ate every bite, then asked for seconds. The simple joy on her face as she licked jelly from her fingers made my chest tight with emotion. Evening brought new challenges. My husband had figured out we were staying somewhere in Catherine's neighborhood. He began a methodical search, knocking on doors, asking about his missing family. His story painted me as unstable, possibly dangerous. Some neighbors believed him. Others, seeing his intensity, grew suspicious. Catherine's doorbell camera caught him returning after dark. This time he didn't knock, just stood there staring at the door. The footage was unsettling, his stillness unnatural. After an hour, he left something on the porch and walked away. Catherine waited until he'd driven off before retrieving it. Our daughter's favorite book with a note inside about family loyalty. That night, I barely slept. Every car passing made me tense. Our daughter had nightmares, crying out about exercises and green smoothies. I held her close, whispering promises of safety I hoped I could keep. Catherine stayed up with us, making tea, offering quiet support. The next morning brought a text from an unknown number. He'd gotten a new phone, anticipating I might block his regular one. The message was calm, reasonable. He was worried about us. Our daughter needed her routine. I was hurting her development by disrupting the program. Classic manipulation dressed as concern. I didn't respond, but I screenshot everything. The lawyer had emphasized documentation. Every text, every encounter, every attempt at contact needed to be recorded, building a pattern of behavior that courts could understand, translating his twisted version of care into language the legal system would recognize. Catherine took time off work to help us. We spent the day apartment hunting in neighborhoods across town, small places, but safe ones, first-floor units with good locks and responsive landlords. I'd need a job soon, but first came stability. One step at a time, the counselor had said. Our daughter bloomed in the absence of his regime. She played freely, ate when hungry, rested when tired. The dark circles under her eyes began to fade. She still startled at sudden noises, still asked permission for everything, but healing had begun. Children are resilient, the counselor assured me. With time and patience, she would recover. My husband's tactics shifted by the third day. The reasonable texts became accusations. I was damaging our daughter, denying her the strength she needed, creating weakness that would cripple her future. The language was familiar, but seeing it in writing revealed its absurdity. No judge would side with starvation and exhaustion over basic care. He found Catherine's workplace, waiting in the parking lot when she arrived. Security footage showed him approaching her car, speaking intensely while she stayed inside with doors locked. When security intervened, he left peacefully, but the message was clear. He could find us anywhere. The lawyer expedited our case. The pattern of stalking, faking, combined with the documented neglect, strengthened our position. A temporary restraining order was granted. Papers would be served that afternoon. It felt like progress, though I knew paper wouldn't stop someone who believed laws were another form of weakness. Our daughter asked about Daddy that evening, not with longing, but with the careful tone of someone checking for danger. I explained he was in timeout for not being nice, a concept she could understand. She nodded solemnly, then asked if she could have ice cream. The normal childhood request made me tear up. The restraining order was served at our house. He was given 15 minutes to collect essentials under police supervision. According to the officer who called me after, he'd been eerily calm, packed methodically, asked no questions, made no threats. The officer found his compliance more unsettling than resistance would have been. That night, for the first time in months, I cooked a meal without scrutiny. Spaghetti with garlic bread, our daughter's pre-regime favorite. She ate with enthusiasm, sauce covering her face, joy in every bite. Catherine joined us, and dinner felt like what family meals should be. Warm, relaxed, full of laughter. The apartment I'd found was available immediately. A small 2-bedroom in a complex with good security and a playground. The landlord, a grandmother herself, didn't ask too many questions about my sudden need for housing. The lease was in my name only. Another small independence that felt huge. Moving day was tense. Though the restraining order was in place, I half expected him to appear. Catherine's brother Sebastian helped us transport our few belongings. I'd only taken essentials from the house. Clothes, toys, documents. Starting fresh meant leaving most of the past behind. Our daughter explored the new apartment with cautious excitement. Her own room she could decorate however she wanted. The playground visible from our window. Other children playing normally. No morning calisthenics required. She pressed her face to the glass, watching them with wonder. The first night in our new place, she slept peacefully. No nightmares, no crying out. I lay awake listening to her steady breathing through the thin walls. We were safe. We were free. The weight of constant vigilance began to lift, though I knew it would take time to fully relax. My husband tested the restraining order within a week. He appeared at the grocery store where I was shopping, staying just far enough away to claim coincidence. I abandoned my cart, gathered our daughter, and left immediately. The security footage would show him following at exactly the legal distance, calculating even in harassment. The job search began in earnest. Years of resume gaps while being a stay-at-home mom made it challenging, but the women's shelter had resources. Interview coaching, professional clothes lending, childcare during appointments. A network of support I hadn't known existed, all aimed at helping women like me rebuild. Our daughter started at a new preschool. The first day, she packed her own lunch, insisting on foods she actually liked. The teachers, briefed on our situation, were wonderfully supportive. They reported she was quiet at first, but gradually began participating, making friends, being a normal 4-year-old. The divorce papers were filed. My husband responded with his own filing, claiming I'd kidnapped our daughter and was causing psychological damage. His lawyer submitted the wellness notebook as evidence of his superior parenting. My lawyer actually laughed when she read it. His own documentation would be his downfall. Weeks turned into a routine. Work, school, home, simple dinners our daughter helped plan, bedtime stories that went on as long as she wanted, weekend trips to the park where she could play freely. The hypervigilance faded slowly, replaced by something approaching normal life. The court date approached. My lawyer was confident, but warned me to prepare for his tactics. He would appear reasonable, concerned, the devoted father trying to save his family from a delusional mother, but we had evidence, documentation, witnesses, the truth, even if he'd never recognize it. Our daughter had her 5th birthday in our little apartment. A small party with Catherine and a few new friends from preschool. She ate cake until her stomach hurt, played until exhausted, fell asleep surrounded by new toys, normal childhood excess that felt like victory. The night before court, I couldn't sleep. Our daughter, sensing my anxiety, crawled into my bed. We lay together in the dark, her small hand in mine. She whispered that she was happy now, that her tummy didn't hurt anymore, that she loved our new home. Strength, I realized, wasn't about enduring suffering. It was about having the courage to seek joy. Morning came with clear skies. I dressed carefully in the outfit Catherine had helped me choose. Professional, but not severe. Our daughter would stay with Catherine during the proceedings. As I kissed her goodbye, she told me to be brave. The student had become the teacher. The courthouse steps felt monumental. Inside, my husband sat with his lawyer, that familiar calculating look in place. But something had changed. I wasn't the same woman who'd enabled his control. Our daughter wasn't his experiment anymore. We were survivors, not subjects. The judge reviewed everything. The wellness notebook, the weight loss documentation, the witness statements, my husband's own words condemning him. When given the chance to speak, he launched into his theories about strength through suffering. The judge's expression grew increasingly incredulous. The ruling was decisive. Full custody to me. Supervised visitation for him. Contingent on completing parenting classes and therapy. The relief was overwhelming. Our daughter was safe. Legally, officially, permanently safe from his regime of manufactured hardship. Outside the courthouse, Catherine waited with our daughter. She ran to me, all smiles and excitement about the ice cream she'd been promised. As I scooped her up, I saw my husband exit behind us. He watched us for a moment, then turned away. Even he couldn't argue with legal reality. That evening, we celebrated quietly. Pizza with all the toppings our daughter wanted. A movie she chose. Bedtime when she was actually tired. Simple freedoms that meant everything. As I tucked her in, she asked if Daddy would get better. I told her I hoped so, but that wasn't our job. Our job was to be happy and healthy in our own way. The months that followed brought continued healing. Therapy for both of us. Our daughter learned to trust her own feelings again. I learned to trust my instincts. The hypervigilance faded into normal caution. We built routines based on joy, not fear. My job at a medical office provided stability. Our daughter thrived in kindergarten. Catherine remained our steadfast support. We'd created our own family, defined by love rather than control. Sometimes I'd catch our daughter eating cookies for breakfast and feel a surge surge of triumph. Weakness, we'd learned, was just another word for being human. The supervised visits began after he completed his required classes. Our daughter was nervous but curious. The reports from the supervisor were encouraging. He was learning slowly to engage with her as a child rather than a project. Progress came in small doses, but it came. 1 year later, we still lived in our little apartment. The walls were covered in our daughter's artwork, all the bright colors he'd once forbidden. She was taller, stronger in the way children should be, through good food and plenty of rest. Her laughter came easily now, no longer something to be earned. I sometimes thought about the woman I'd been, accepting his distorted worldview, enabling his control. But mostly, I focused forward, on raising our daughter to trust herself, on building a life defined by our choices, on teaching her that real strength meant knowing when to rest, when to ask for help, when to choose joy over endurance. The last time I saw him at pickup, he looked different, softer somehow. He asked how our daughter was doing in school. I told him about her reading progress, her new friends, her love of art class. He nodded, and for a moment, I saw something like regret in his eyes. Then our daughter appeared, and his face lit up with genuine pleasure. She showed him a picture she'd drawn, a rainbow, imperfect and glorious. He praised it without critique, without lessons about reality's harsh truths. Small progress, but progress nonetheless. As they walked to the supervisor's car, I heard her chattering about her week. He listened without correcting, without improving, just listened. That night, she told me Daddy was getting better at being nice. The simple assessment from a 5-year-old's perspective held more truth than any adult analysis. He was trying. We were healing. Life moved forward, one day at a time, one choice at a time. Our story wasn't unique. The shelter support group had taught me that. Women and children escaping different versions of the same controlling narrative. But survival was possible. Recovery was achievable. Strength, real strength, came from choosing love over fear, flexibility over rigidity, humanity over perfection. As I write this, our daughter is asleep in her room, surrounded by stuffed animals and storybooks. Tomorrow she has a play date. This weekend we're trying the new playground across town. Simple plans for a simple life. No regimens, no programs, no experiments. Just a mother and daughter learning to be themselves. The journey continues. Healing isn't linear. Some days are harder than others, but we face them together, with ice cream and hugs, and the radical act of accepting our human needs. We are not weak. We are not strong. We are simply, beautifully, ordinarily ourselves. And that, I've learned, is the greatest strength of all. So the story ends with them finding peace in just being normal people, not having to prove anything anymore. I'm curious how the father actually changed his whole way of thinking after all those years of believing in his strange ideas. The daughter drawing a rainbow and him just saying it's nice without any lessons about life seems like such a big shift from the camping trip we saw earlier. It makes me wonder what exactly happened in those parenting classes that got through to him when nothing else did before.